Captain Taman sat in his command chair aboard the UES Resilience, watching the stars drift past the main viewing screen. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation for only 15 years. It still felt strange. To him, that other species in the galaxy called humans Deathworlders, like it was some kind of curse word. Most aliens spoke the term in whispers, as if saying it too loud might summon something terrible. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep from the control panels. Lieutenant Jae-hyun worked at the navigation station, plotting their course to the Outer Rim territories where they were supposed to meet a Federation supply convoy. It was routine work, the kind of mission that kept human ships busy while the Federation decided what to do with Earth's newest members. Taiman understood why the other species were nervous around humans. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, meaning it was so hostile that most civilized species would die within hours of landing on its surface. The gravity alone would crush the bones of the delicate Signan traders, and the atmospheric pressure would make the peaceful Volani researchers explode like balloons. Yet humans walked around on Earth every day without thinking twice about it. The captain was reviewing supply reports when the communications officer, Ensign Hai Jin, suddenly straightened at her station. Her eyes went wide as she pressed her earpiece closer to her head and started adjusting controls with rapid movements. "Captain," she said, turning toward him with worry written across her face. "I'm receiving a distress signal. It's faint, but the computer is boosting it through the filters." Taman leaned forward in his chair. "Put it through the main speakers." The bridge filled with static and interference. Then a voice broke through the noise. It was high-pitched and trembling, speaking in the universal translator's neutral tones. But Taman could hear the fear underneath the mechanical translation. "This is Dr. Nari of Volani Research Station 77 Alpha, the voice said, crackling with distance and desperation. "We are under attack by unknown hostiles. They have breached our outer sections and are systematically working their way toward the core laboratory. We have no weapons and no means of defense. Please, if anyone can hear this transmission, we need immediate assistance." The transmission cut to static for several seconds, then Dr. Nari's voice returned, even more frantic than before. "They are not killing us," she continued, and her words sent a chill down Tamin's spine. "They are taking us alive. We can hear them in the corridors dragging our colleagues away. The screaming stopped an hour ago from Section C, but we can still detect life signs. Something terrible is happening to them. We estimate 47 hours before they reach our position. Please, anyone who receives this message, we are located at coordinates." Static consumed the signal, and despite Hyejin's best efforts to restore it, only silence came through the speakers. Commander Hyun, Taemin's second in command, moved from his position near the tactical displays to stand beside the captain's chair. His face was grim as he processed what they had just heard. "Volani Research Station 77 Alpha, Hyun said, calling up information on his personal data pad. "I'm pulling their registration data now. It's a scientific outpost studying the atmospheric dynamics of gas giants. Current location is the Helix 7 system, approximately 18 light-years from our present position." Dr. So Young, the ship's chief xenobiologist, had been working at a side station during the transmission, but now she approached with her own data pad in hand. Her expression was troubled as she shared what she had found. "Captain, I've been researching the Volani species since we heard the distress call," she said. "They are silicon-based life forms that evolved on low-gravity worlds with thin atmospheres. Their bone structure is incredibly fragile by our standards, and they have never developed any form of military technology. Their entire civilization is based on peaceful scientific research and philosophical meditation." Taemin stood up from his command chair and walked to the main viewing screen, staring out at the stars while his mind worked through the implications. The Volani were completely helpless with no way to defend themselves against whatever had attacked their station. "What about Federation response protocols?" he asked without turning around. Hyun consulted his data pad again, running through official channels and fleet positions. His shoulders sagged as he found the information they all feared. "The nearest Federation patrol fleet is currently responding to a diplomatic crisis in the Andorian sector," Hyun reported. "Even if they diverted immediately, they couldn't reach the Helix 7 system for at least 12 days. The Villani researchers said they had 47 hours at most. Dr. So Young cleared her throat nervously. Captain, there's something else you should know about the Villani. They have never experienced violence of any kind. Their species has no concept of warfare, slavery, or deliberate harm to other beings. Whatever is happening to them, they have no framework for understanding it or dealing with it psychologically. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Taemin could feel the weight of decisions settling on his shoulders. The Federation had strict protocols about member species interfering in situations beyond their designated roles. Humans were still new to galactic civilization, and Earth's government had been very clear about following Federation rules exactly to prove that Deathworlders could be trusted. Lieutenant Jae-hyun spoke up from his navigation station. Captain, I've calculated the course to Helix 7. If we push our engines to maximum sustainable velocity, we could reach the system in 16 hours. That would put us well ahead of any Federation response, Commander Hyun observed. But our standing orders are to avoid unauthorized military actions. The Federation Council was very specific about humans not taking independent action that could be seen as aggressive. Taemin turned away from the viewing screen to face his senior staff. He could see the conflict in their eyes, the same struggle he was feeling in his own mind. Every human on the bridge understood what it meant to be helpless against a superior force, but they also understood what it meant to have the power to help and choose not to use it. What do we know about the attackers? He asked Dr. So Young. She consulted her research files, pulling up everything the Federation database contained about hostile species in that region of space. Her expression grew darker as she read. Based on the description of systematic capture and the behavior patterns Dr. Nari described, this matches the operational profile of the Skarn Raiders, she said. They are a nomadic species that survives by capturing other beings and converting them into biological components for their technology. The process is reportedly performed on living subjects to preserve certain cellular functions. The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Commander Hyun's jaw tightened as he processed this information. They're not just killing the researchers, he said quietly. They're turning them into spare parts while they're still alive. Ensign Hyejin had been monitoring communication channels during their discussion, and now she looked up from her station with renewed urgency. Captain, I'm detecting additional transmissions from the Villani station, she reported. They're very weak, but the computer is enhancing them. It sounds like Dr. Nari is still broadcasting. Put it through, Taemin ordered. The speakers crackled to life again, and Dr. Nari's voice filled the bridge, even more desperate than before. This is Dr. Nari. If anyone is receiving this transmission, please record this message for the Federation archives. The attackers have identified themselves as Skarn Raiders. They are methodically harvesting my colleagues and converting their biology into ship components. We can hear the machinery working in the outer sections. The sounds are indescribable, her voice broke for a moment, then continued with forced calm. I want the galaxy to know that the Villani research team discovered something important in our studies of Helix 7. The gas giant contains elements that could revolutionize energy production for peaceful purposes. We were going to share this information freely with all Federation species. Now it seems our discovery will die with us unless someone comes to help. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Taemin looked around at his crew, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. The Federation protocols were clear, but so was the moral choice in front of them. Somewhere in the darkness of space, innocent beings were being slowly tortured to death, while their potential saviors debated regulations and proper procedures. Jae-hyun, he said finally, set course for the Helix 7 system, maximum velocity. The navigator's hands flew over his controls with obvious relief. Course laid in, Captain. Estimated arrival time is 15 hours and 42 minutes. Commander Hyun stepped closer to Taemin's position. Captain, I have to ask. What are we going to do when we get there? The Federation protocols for first contact with hostile species are very specific about avoiding unnecessary violence. Taemin settled back into his command chair, his decision made. We're going to save those researchers, Commander. As for the Federation protocols about unnecessary violence, I think we'll need to have a conversation about what exactly constitutes necessary in a situation like this. The crew of the UES Resilience moved with purpose through the ship's corridors as word spread about their new mission. Captain Taemin had called a senior staff meeting in the main briefing room, and officers from every department were gathering to discuss what they knew about the situation at Helix 7. Lieutenant Wu Jin arrived first, carrying a portable tactical display unit under his arm. As the ship's chief tactical officer, he had already begun analyzing what they might face when they reached the Villani research station. His preliminary assessment was not encouraging. The Skarn raiders typically operate in swarm formations, he explained as other officers took their seats around the briefing table. Intelligence reports suggest they use between 20 and 50 vessels per raiding operation, depending on the size of their target. Chief Engineer Minho entered the briefing room wiping his hands on a maintenance cloth. He had been down in the engine compartments, pushing the ship's propulsion systems to their maximum safe limits to reduce their travel time to Helix 7. I've got the engines running at 112% of normal output, he reported to Captain Taemin. We can maintain this speed for about 18 hours before we risk serious damage to the primary reactor systems. Dr. So Young was the last to arrive, her arms full of data pads and research materials about both the Villani and the Skarn species. She looked tired but determined as she set her materials on the table. I've been studying everything we know about Skarn biology and technology, she said without preamble. The good news is that they're not significantly more advanced than we are in terms of basic engineering. The bad news is that they have absolutely no concept of mercy or negotiation. Commander Hyun activated the main display screen, showing a tactical overview of the Helix 7 system. The Villani research station appeared as a small blue dot, orbiting the massive gas giant, while projected positions of Skarn vessels appeared as red symbols scattered around the area. Our biggest challenge is going to be the numbers game, Hyun explained. Even if we assume a minimal raiding force, we're looking at being outnumbered at least 20-1. The Resilience is a heavy cruiser designed for long-range patrol work, not fleet engagement. Captain Taemin studied the tactical display while considering their options. The UES Resilience was indeed built for patrol duty, but it was also a HFY human ship, designed according to Earth's military engineering principles. That meant it was constructed like a mobile fortress with redundant systems, heavy armor plating, and weapons that other Federation species considered excessively powerful for peacekeeping work. What about Federation protocols for dealing with hostiles? Asked Lieutenant Wu Jin. Are we authorized to use lethal force in a rescue situation? Dr. So Young consulted one of her data pads, scrolling through pages of Federation regulations and guidelines. Her expression grew more troubled as she read. The Federation rules of engagement are very clear about proportional response, she said. We're required to attempt diplomatic contact first, then use minimum necessary force to resolve the situation. Lethal force is only authorized as a last resort when all other options have been exhausted. Diplomatic contact, repeated Chief Engineer Minho with obvious skepticism. With beings who are currently turning peaceful researchers into biological spare parts. Commander Hyun brought up additional information on the main display, showing detailed specifications of typical Skarn raider vessels. The ships were roughly the same size as Federation patrol craft, but they were heavily modified with biological processing equipment and slave-holding facilities. The Skarn don't recognize Federation authority, he pointed out. Their entire culture is based on taking what they want from species too weak to stop them. I doubt they'll be interested in negotiating. Captain Taemin stood up from his chair and walked to the display screen, studying the projected battle zone. He could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not just for his own crew, but for the innocent beings they were racing to save. We'll follow Federation protocols, he said finally. We'll attempt to establish communication with the Skarn and give them the opportunity to withdraw peacefully. But I want everyone to understand something clearly. He turned to face his senior staff, his expression serious and determined. The Federation protocols were written by species who evolved on peaceful worlds, where the worst threat they ever faced was resource scarcity or natural disasters. Those protocols work fine when dealing with civilized beings who share similar values about the sanctity of life. But we're not dealing with civilized beings here. Dr. So-Young looked up from her datapad with a troubled expression. Captain, if we deviate from Federation protocols, it could result in Earth being expelled from the Federation entirely. The other member species are already nervous about having Deathworlders in their organization. Then we'd better make sure we can justify our actions, Taemin replied. Dr. So-Young, I want you to maintain continuous communication logs throughout this operation. Document everything we do and why we do it. If the Federation wants to question our methods afterward, they'll have a complete record to review. Lieutenant Wu Jin activated his portable tactical display, showing detailed schematics of the Resilience's weapon systems. Unlike the elegant energy-based weapons favored by most Federation species, human ships carried a mixture of technologies that other species found disturbing in their effectiveness. What are our rules of engagement once we arrive? He asked. The ship's weapons systems include some technologies that the Federation has classified as unnecessarily destructive. Captain Taemin considered this question carefully. Human military doctrine had been developed through centuries of warfare against other humans, creating tactics and weapons designed to be devastatingly effective against intelligent opponents. The Federation's more civilized approach to conflict resolution had never been tested against truly hostile species. We'll modify our weapons to reduce lethality where possible, he decided. But the safety of the Villani researchers takes priority over Skarn casualties. If we have to choose between following Federation guidelines and saving innocent lives, we save the innocent lives. Chief Engineer Minho leaned forward in his chair. Captain, with respect, the Skarn won't show the same restraint. Their weapons are specifically designed to incapacitate targets for biological harvesting. They're not going to worry about using excessive force against us. Sergeant Yunhei, the ship's Marine commander, had been listening quietly from her position, near the briefing room door. Now she spoke up with the direct manner that characterized Earth's military personnel. Sir, my Marines are ready for boarding operations if necessary, she said. We've been training for hostile ship infiltration scenarios since we left Earth. The Skarn won't be expecting the kind of close-quarters tactics we can deploy. The meeting continued for another hour, as the senior staff reviewed everything they knew about the situation and prepared contingency plans for multiple scenarios. By the time they were finished, everyone understood their roles and responsibilities for the operation ahead. As the officers left the briefing room to return to their duties, Dr. So-Young lingered behind to speak privately with Captain Taemin. Captain, there's something else I discovered in my research that I didn't want to mention in front of the full staff, she said quietly. The Skarn have encountered human vessels before, about 8 years ago in the Outer Colonies region. Taemin looked at her with interest. What happened? A single human freighter was attacked by a small Skarn raiding party, she explained. 3 ships against 1. The official Federation report lists it as a complete loss, all hands presumed killed. But that's not the whole story, is it? He asked, reading the expression on her face. Dr. So-Young consulted her datapad one more time. I found some unofficial reports from Skarn communications intercepts. After the attack, the surviving Skarn vessels sent a message back to their fleet command. The translation is rough, but the general meaning is clear. She paused, then read, directly from her datapad. The soft skins from the death world do not die easily. The prey ship fought like a cornered predator. Recommend avoiding future contact with this species until we understand their capabilities better. Captain Taemin absorbed this information silently. It confirmed what he had suspected about their upcoming encounter with the Skarn raiders. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Dr. So-Young, he said. Make sure to include that information in your communication logs. It may be relevant to understanding why diplomatic solutions are unlikely to succeed. She nodded and gathered her materials, then hesitated at the briefing room door. Captain, what are we really going to do when we get to Helix 7? She asked. I mean, what are we actually prepared to do to save those researchers? Taemin looked out through the briefing room's small viewport at the stars streaming past as the Resilience raced toward its destination. We're going to do whatever is necessary, Dr. So-Young, he said quietly. And I think the galaxy is about to learn something new about humans in the process. The ship continued through space, carrying 200 humans toward a confrontation that would demonstrate why Earth was classified as a death world, and why Deathworlders might be exactly what the galaxy. The UES Resilience dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Helix 7 system, with a flash of blue light that briefly illuminated the surrounding darkness. On the bridge, Captain Taemin felt the familiar sensation of reality snapping back into normal physics as their faster-than-light engines powered down. Hyperspace transition complete, reported Lieutenant Jae-hyun from the navigation station. All systems showing green. We are approximately 4 million kilometers from the primary target zone. Immediately, the bridge crew began their systematic scan of the system. What they found confirmed their worst fears and exceeded their expectations at the same time. "Captain," called out Ensign Hya-jin from the communications station, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "I'm detecting multiple active transmissions from the Villani research station. Dr. Nari is still broadcasting, but the signal is very weak. Put it through," Taemin ordered, settling into his command chair as the bridge speakers filled with static and interference. Dr. Nari's voice came through the noise, weaker than before but still determined to share information with anyone who might be listening. "This is Dr. Nari, Villani Research Station 77 Alpha. If anyone receives this transmission, please know that we tried to resist. The raiders have taken most of our colleagues to the lower processing levels. We can hear the machinery working constantly now. Some of my friends have been silent for hours, but their life signs still register on our monitors." The transmission paused, filled with static, then continued. "We estimate less than 6 hours before they reach our current hiding place in the core laboratory. I want the Federation to know that our research data has been transmitted to the emergency beacon satellites. Our discoveries about Helix 7's unique energy properties should survive even if we do not." Lieutenant Wu Jin looked up from his tactical displays with grim news. "Captain, I'm reading 47 distinct Skarn vessels in the immediate area, around the research station. Configuration matches standard raiding fleet patterns. 23 light raiders, 18 medium processing ships, 4 heavy slave transports, and 2 command vessels." Commander Hyun moved to stand beside the captain's chair, his expression troubled as he processed the tactical situation. "Sir, we're outnumbered 47-1, he said quietly. "Even with our advantages in armor and firepower, those are overwhelming odds for direct engagement." On the main viewing screen, the gas giant Helix 7 dominated the display, its swirling atmospheric bands of purple and gold creating a beautiful backdrop for the horror taking place in orbit. The Villani research station was barely visible as a tiny dot against the massive planet, surrounded by the dark shapes of Skarn vessels, like predators circling wounded prey. Dr. So-young had been monitoring her xenobiological sensors since they arrived in the system, and now she looked up with information that made everyone's blood run cold. "Captain, I'm detecting massive biological processing activity from the Skarn ship," she reported. "The energy signatures match what we know about their conversion procedures. They're not just harvesting the Villani researchers, they're actively processing them while they're still alive." Captain Taemin stood up from his command chair and walked to the main viewing screen, staring at the distant research station where innocent beings were being tortured in ways that civilized minds could barely comprehend. "Open a channel to the Skarn fleet," he ordered. "All frequencies, maximum broadcast power." Ensign Hee-jin worked at her controls for several moments, then nodded to indicate the channel was open. "This is Captain Taemin of the United Earth Ship Resilience," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You are in violation of Federation space and engaging in hostile actions against member species. I order you to cease your activities immediately and release all captured personnel." The response came almost immediately, transmitted on the same frequency but with audio quality that suggested the Skarn communication equipment was partially biological in nature. The voice that answered was harsh and grating, with undertones that made human listeners instinctively uncomfortable. "Soft-skinned mammal from the Death World speaks commands to Skarn," came the reply through the universal translator. "This prey ship travels alone, far from its pack. You will withdraw or become resources for the fleet." Commander Hyun checked his tactical displays again. "Sir, the Skarn vessels are maintaining position around the research station. No indication They're taking our warning seriously. Lieutenant Wu Jin reported additional information from his sensor readings. Captain, I'm detecting weapons lock from multiple Skarn ships. They're treating us as a threat, but not an immediate one. Captain Taemin tried once more to resolve the situation through diplomatic means, as required by Federation protocols. Skarn, Fleet Commander, this is your final warning. He transmitted. Release the Villani researchers and withdraw from this system immediately, or we will be forced to take action to protect Federation citizens. The Skarn response was swift and brutal. On the main viewing screen, one of the Skarn vessels near the research station fired what appeared to be a biological projectile at the station's outer hull. The impact didn't cause an explosion, but rather seemed to release some kind of corrosive substance that began eating through the station's protective plating. Simultaneously, the Skarn commander's voice returned over the communication channel, filled with what the universal translator interpreted as amusement. Deathworld mammal, watch as prey suffer, the voice said. You see power of Skarn fleet. Your single ship cannot stop biological processing. Withdraw now or join the harvest. To emphasize their point, the Skarn began broadcasting live footage from inside the research station. The images that appeared on the Resilience's auxiliary screens showed Villani researchers being dragged through corridors by mechanical appendages, while automated systems prepared them for biological conversion. The effect on the human crew was immediate and profound. Every person on the bridge felt something primal and dangerous stirring in their minds as they watched innocent beings subjected to systematic torture. This was exactly the kind of scenario that had shaped human evolution for millions of years. Predators threatening the weak while the strong decided whether to intervene. Captain, said Sergeant Yoon Hae from her position near the bridge tactical station. My Marines are requesting permission to prepare for boarding operations. Dr. So Young looked up from her sensor displays with additional information that pushed the situation beyond any possibility of peaceful resolution. Sir, the Skarn just executed 3 Villani researchers on live broadcast, she reported, her voice shaking with controlled anger. They're sending the footage directly to us, apparently as a demonstration of their intentions. Captain Taemin felt something cold and calculating settle into his mind, the same mental state that his ancestors had entered when faced with existential threats on Earth's hostile surface. Around him, he could see his crew experiencing the same transformation as their civilized Federation training gave way to older, deeper programming. Commander Hyun, he said calmly, his voice carrying a tone that none of his crew had heard before. Activate Protocol Omega. Hyun's hands moved to his command console without hesitation. Protocol Omega activated, sir. All departments report ready for Deathworld operational parameters. Throughout the ship, systems that had remained hidden during their peaceful Federation service began coming online. Weapon ports that had been disguised as maintenance hatches opened to reveal advanced human military technology. Stealth systems designed for asteroid belt warfare powered up and began masking the ship's true capabilities. Combat drones that other species would consider violations of warfare treaties deployed from concealed launch bays. Lieutenant Wu Jin watched his tactical displays transform as the ship's true nature revealed itself. Captain, all weapons systems are online and ready. Stealth drones are deployed and approaching Skarn positions. Marines are suited up and ready for vacuum operations. The Skarn fleet had noticed the changes in the human ship's configuration, and their response was predictably hostile. 23 raiders began moving toward the Resilience, while the processing ships continued their work at the research station. Sir, reported Chief Engineer Minho from the engineering station, I'm reading confused communications between Skarn vessels. Their sensors can't get accurate readings on our ship's actual capabilities. Dr. So Young had begun broadcasting everything to the Federation emergency channels, knowing that what was about to happen would either revolutionize galactic politics or result in humanity's expulsion from civilized space. Captain, I'm transmitting continuous updates to Federation Command, she reported. They'll have a complete record of everything we do here. The Skarn commander's voice returned over the communication channel, no longer amused but definitely interested in the changes they were observing in the human ship. Deathworld vessel shows hidden weapons, came the transmission. Skarn fleet, we'll harvest your technology after we process your crew. Your resistance will make the conversion more interesting. On the tactical display, the approaching Skarn raiders were now close enough to open fire, their biological weapons charging with energy signatures that suggested they were designed to disable, rather than. The first wave of human attacks hit the Skarn fleet before their sensors could even register what was happening. Lieutenant Wu Jin had coordinated the assault using thousands of microdrones, each no larger than a human finger, but carrying enough concentrated explosive power to breach ship hulls. The drones moved through space like a metallic plague, too small for Skarn targeting systems to track effectively, but large enough to cause devastating damage when they reached their targets. Captain Taman watched the tactical display as red. Symbols representing Skarn vessels began blinking out of existence with mechanical precision. This wasn't the elegant, measured warfare that characterized most galactic conflicts. This was extermination, carried out with the cold efficiency that had made humans the dominant predators on a world where everything tried to kill them. First drone wave has eliminated 12 light raiders, reported Lieutenant Wu Jin, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were accomplishing. Second wave is targeting the processing ships. Estimated time to complete neutralization of immediate threats, 14 minutes. The Skarn response was chaotic and desperate. Their remaining ships scattered from their positions around the research station, trying to establish defensive formations while their commanders attempted to understand what they were facing. Their communications channels filled with confused reports about weapons that appeared from nowhere and attacks that came from directions their sensors couldn't detect. Commander Hyun monitored the enemy communications through their translation systems. "Sir, the Skarn are reporting massive casualties, but they can't identify our attack vectors. Their fleet commander is calling for reinforcements from other raiding groups in the area." "How long before additional Skarn forces arrive?" asked Captain Taman. "Based on their transmission patterns, approximately 47 hours, Hyun replied. "But sir, they're also broadcasting detailed reports about our capabilities to their fleet command. Word is going to spread quickly through their network, Dr. So Young looked up from her biological sensors with urgent news. "Captain, I'm still detecting life signs from the captured Volani researchers. If we're going to save them, we need to move fast. The Skarn are accelerating their processing procedures." This information triggered the next phase of the human assault. Sergeant Yoon Hae's Marines had been waiting in the ship's launch bays, sealed into individual assault pods that would allow them to operate in the hard vacuum of space. Unlike the boarding tactics used by other species, human Marines didn't wait for docking procedures or airlocks. They launched themselves directly at enemy ships, cutting through hulls with portable plasma torches and moving through Skarn vessels, like an unstoppable infection. "Marine assault teams away," reported Sergeant Yoon Hae from the tactical station. 60 Marines in individual pods targeting the processing ships and slave transports. Estimated boarding time 4 minutes. Captain Taman shifted his attention to the main viewing screen, where he could see tiny lights moving through space toward the remaining Skarn vessels. Each light represented a human being, willing to throw themselves into mortal combat in the vacuum of space to save beings they had never met. The Skarn had never encountered anything like this. Their species had evolved as predators of weak civilizations, accustomed to fighting beings who valued their own lives above all else, and would surrender rather than risk death. They had no framework for understanding opponents who would voluntarily expose themselves to lethal environments in order to protect others. "First boarding parties have breached Skarn processing ship hulls," announced Sergeant Yoon Hae. "Marines report heavy resistance but successful penetration of enemy defensive systems. They're moving toward the biological processing centers now." Chief Engineer Min Ho had been working on a different aspect of the assault, deploying nanoscale machines that could infiltrate Skarn computer systems. But instead of simply disabling their technology, the nanobots were designed to force the enemy ships to broadcast their own destruction across their communication networks. "Sir, our nanoscale infiltration systems are online in 15 Skarn vessels," reported Minho. "I can force them to transmit real-time footage of our boarding actions to their entire fleet. Every surviving Skarn ship will witness exactly what happens to their colleagues." "Do it," ordered Captain Taman. "Make sure every raider in their network understands the consequences of threatening Federation citizens. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Skarn vessels throughout the system began receiving live broadcasts, showing human Marines moving through their ships with terrifying efficiency. The Marines didn't fight like civilized beings attempting to minimize casualties. They fought like apex predators, reclaiming their territory from intruders. Dr. So Young monitored the rescue operations from her station, tracking the life signs of captured Volani researchers as human Marines fought their way toward the processing centers. "Captain, our boarding teams have reached the first group of prisoners," she reported. 12 Volani researchers recovered alive, but they're in severe psychological shock. The Marines are having difficulty communicating with them because the researchers are terrified of all bipedal species now. This news highlighted one of the unexpected consequences of the rescue operation. The Volani researchers had been traumatized, not just by Skarn brutality, but by their complete helplessness in the face of violence. Now they were being saved by beings whose approach to combat was so ruthlessly efficient that it was almost as frightening as their captors. Lieutenant Wu Jin continued coordinating the drone swarms, which had moved on to targeting the Skarn command vessels. These larger ships had better defensive systems, but human military technology had been designed to overcome opponents who were actively trying to kill them, not just disable them for capture. "Command Vessel Alpha is showing critical damage," he reported. "Their biological processing equipment is offline and their crew is abandoning ship. Command Vessel Beta is attempting to retreat to the outer system. Don't let them escape," ordered Captain Taman. "No one who participated in torturing those researchers gets to leave this system alive." The ruthlessness of this command would have shocked most Federation species, but it was perfectly logical to human thinking. Predators who threatened the innocent under human protection had to be eliminated completely, or they would simply find other victims elsewhere. The final phase of the battle lasted less than 30 minutes. Human drones, Marines, and nanoscale weapon systems worked in perfect coordination to systematically destroy every Skarn vessel in the system. The efficiency was so complete that later military analysts would study the engagement for years, trying to understand how a single ship had eliminated 47 enemy vessels without sustaining a single casualty. "All Skarn vessels destroyed or disabled," reported Lieutenant Wu Jin. "No enemy survivors detected. Marine teams are conducting final sweeps of the processing ships to recover any remaining Volani prisoners." Dr. So Young had been monitoring Federation emergency channels throughout the battle, and now she looked up with news that would have long-term implications for humanity's place in galactic society. "Captain, our combat footage has been automatically transmitted to Federation Command through the emergency broadcasting protocols," she said. "Every major species in the Federation has access to complete recordings of our engagement with the Skarn." The implications of this were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, civilized species were witnessing what happened when humans fought without restraint to protect the innocent. The footage showed not just the military capabilities of Deathworlders, but their willingness to risk everything for beings they barely knew. Sergeant Yunhai's voice came over the communication system from one of the captured Skarn processing ships. "Captain, final prisoner count is 38 Volani researchers recovered alive," she reported. "All are in need of immediate medical attention, and most are suffering from severe psychological trauma. They're afraid of us, sir. They keep asking if we're going to process them too." This last detail cut through the satisfaction of military victory and reminded everyone of the cost of what they had just witnessed. The Volani researchers had been saved, but they had also been exposed to a level of violence that their peaceful species had never imagined possible. Captain Taemian stood up from his command chair and walked to the main viewing screen, looking out at the debris field that had once been a Skarn raiding fleet. 47 ships reduced to scrap metal and biological waste in less than 4 hours. 0 human casualties. It was a demonstration of military superiority so complete that it would reshape how every species in the galaxy viewed humanity. "Commander Hyun, set course for the Volani research station," he ordered. "We need to provide medical assistance to the survivors and secure the area until Federation reinforcements arrive." "Sir?" said Dr. So Young quietly. What do we tell the Federation Council when they ask about our methods? The weapons we used and the tactics we employed go far beyond anything in the approved peacekeeping protocols. Captain Taemin considered her question while watching his crew efficiently manage the aftermath of their victory. The news of what happened at Helix 7 spread through the galaxy faster than light-speed communication networks could contain it. Within 6 hours of the engagement, every major civilization in the Federation had received detailed recordings of a single human ship eliminating 47 Skarn raiders without sustaining a single casualty. Admiral Kun Wu sat in his office at Earth Defense Command, watching priority communications flood in from 12 different galactic powers. His desk display showed an endless stream of requests, demands, and offers that ranged from diplomatic cooperation to outright terror. The galaxy's perception of humanity had changed overnight, and no one was quite sure what that meant for the future. The first call came from the Signan Republic, a peaceful trading federation that had always maintained friendly but cautious relations with Earth. Ambassador Veltar appeared on the communication screen, her crystalline features reflecting the anxiety that seemed to be spreading through civilized space. "Admiral Kun Wu," she began, her voice carrying the formal tones of diplomatic protocol but with an underlying nervousness that hadn't been there before. "The Signan Republic wishes to formally request protection services from the United Earth Defense Force. Our border systems have been experiencing increased raider activity, and our current security arrangements appear inadequate." Admiral Kun Wu leaned back in his chair, processing the implications of this request. The Signans had their own military forces, small but sufficient for their needs. If they were asking for human protection, it meant they had seen something in the Helix 7 recordings that had fundamentally changed their assessment of galactic security threats. "Ambassador, the Federation has extensive peacekeeping protocols in place for member species," he replied carefully. "Have you contacted Federation Command about increasing patrol frequency in your territory?" Veltar's crystalline form shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as Signan discomfort. "Admiral, with respect, Federation peacekeeping forces operate under rules of engagement that prioritize diplomatic solutions and proportional response. The Helix 7 recordings suggest that human forces operate under different parameters entirely." Before Admiral Kunwu could respond to this observation, his aide announced that emergency communications were arriving from the Hegemony, a militaristic alliance that had always viewed human membership in the Federation with suspicion. This was going to be a very different conversation. General Thaxmore of the Hegemony appeared on the screen, his armored form radiating the controlled aggression that characterized his species. Unlike the Signans, the Hegemony wasn't asking for protection. They were demanding explanations. "Human Admiral," Thaxmore began without preamble, "the Hegemony requires immediate clarification of your species' military capabilities. The Helix 7 engagement demonstrates technologies and tactics that were not declared during your Federation membership application." Admiral Kunwu had been expecting this call, but the timing was still inconvenient. The Hegemony had always been concerned about potential military threats within the Federation, and the complete destruction of the Skarn fleet had apparently triggered their security protocols. "General Thaxmore, all human military technologies comply with Federation regulations," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "We provided complete technical specifications for our defensive and peacekeeping equipment during the membership review process." "Peacekeeping equipment," repeated Thaxmore with obvious skepticism. "Admiral, the recordings show your vessel deploying weapon systems that reduced 47 enemy ships to debris in less than 4 hours. Our military analysts are unable to identify several of the technologies your forces employed." The conversation was interrupted by another priority communication from the Federation Council itself. Admiral Kunwu found himself looking at 3 screens simultaneously: the nervous Signan ambassador, the suspicious Hegemony general, and now Chancellor Vorthak of the Federation's governing body. Chancellor Vorthak was a Madarian, a species known for their diplomatic skills and careful consideration of complex political situations. His expression as he reviewed the Helix 7 recordings was troubled but thoughtful. "Admiral Kunwu," the Chancellor began, The Federation Council has reviewed the complete records of the Helix 7 incident. While we commend the successful rescue of the Volani researchers, we have significant concerns about the methods employed by your forces. Chancellor, Captain Taemin followed. All required protocols, Admiral Kunwu replied. He attempted diplomatic contact with the Skarn forces and used force only when they refused to release their prisoners and continued their hostile actions. The diplomatic attempt lasted approximately 90 seconds, observed Chancellor Vorthak, after which your forces proceeded to eliminate the entire Skarn fleet with what can only be described as overwhelming efficiency. Several member species have expressed concern about the implications of this approach to conflict resolution. Meanwhile, back in the Helix 7 system, Captain Taemin and his crew were dealing with the immediate aftermath of their actions. The rescued Volani researchers had been transferred to the ship's medical bay, where Dr. So Young and her staff were attempting to provide care for beings who had never experienced violence of any kind. Dr. Nari, the lead researcher who had sent the original distress call, was conscious but severely traumatized by her ordeal. When Dr. So Young approached her medical bed, the Volani scientist recoiled with obvious fear. "Please," Dr. Nari whispered through the universal translator. "Are you going to process us too? We saw what your kind did to the raiders. The efficiency was terrifying." Dr. So Young felt her heart break as she realized that the rescue operation, necessary as it had been, had traumatized the victims almost as much as their original captors. The Volani researchers had witnessed human combat capabilities and were unable to distinguish between protective violence and predatory aggression. "Dr. Nari, we're here to help you," she said gently. "The raiders are gone. You're safe now." But even as she spoke these words, Dr. So Young could see that the concept of safety had been forever altered for these peaceful beings. They had learned that the galaxy contained species capable of systematic torture, and they had learned that their rescuers were capable of systematic destruction. Neither lesson would be easy to forget. The psychological impact of the rescue extended beyond just the Volani researchers. Throughout the Federation, species that had never given serious thought to military threats were suddenly re-evaluating their assumptions about galactic security. The Andorian Council, a consortium of scientific colonies, sent a formal communication to Earth requesting detailed information about human military training programs. The Tauri Collective wanted to know if humans would be willing to establish training facilities for other species' security forces. Even the peaceful monks of Zerion Prime were asking questions about defensive capabilities, but perhaps the most significant reaction came from the Skarn raiders themselves. Their communication networks, monitored by Federation intelligence services, revealed that the complete destruction of their Helix 7 fleet had sent shockwaves through their entire raiding culture. A message intercepted from Skarn High Command read, "All raiding groups avoid human vessels and human-protected space. The Deathworld predators hunt with purpose unknown to civilized thinking. Recommend immediate evacuation of any system where human ships are detected." Dr. So Young had compiled all of this information into her post-action report, a document that would become one of the most studied pieces of xenopsychological literature in galactic history. Her conclusions were disturbing in their implications for how the galaxy would view humanity going forward. The rescued Volani researchers exhibit symptoms consistent with exposure to incomprehensible predatory behavior, she wrote. They were not just traumatized by Skarn brutality, but by the clinical efficiency with which human forces eliminated their captors. From their perspective, they were rescued by beings whose approach to violence is so systematically devastating that it represents a fundamental challenge to their understanding of civilized behavior. Captain Taemin read this report while standing in the ship's observation deck, looking out at the debris field that had once been a Skarn raiding fleet. The moral complexity of their success was not lost on him. They had saved innocent lives, but in doing so, they had also demonstrated that humans possessed capabilities that made even their allies nervous. Commander Hyun joined him at the observation deck window, carrying a data pad with the latest communications from Earth and the Federation Council. "Captain, we're being recalled to Earth for extensive debriefing," he reported. "The Federation wants to understand our capabilities better, and several member species are requesting formal security consultations." "What's the unofficial word?" asked Captain Taman. Hyun consulted his datapad for the less formal communications that had been flowing through back channels. Unofficially, sir, the galaxy is scared of us now, he said bluntly. But they're also realizing that being scared of us might be less dangerous than being unprotected from things like the Skarn Raiders. 3 days later, Captain Taman received new orders that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come.